Are you thinking about buying a classic car? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you everything you need to look at when you're thinking about buying a classic car. Things to look out for, things to, pay attention to if it's good or bad or whether you should buy it or not. But I'm going to show you everything you need to know when you're thinking about buying a classic car. Number one, most important, if you're thinking about buying a classic car, you want to check the frame, make sure it's not rotten. Say if it lived up north where it snows a lot and they put a lot of salt on the road, the rust bucket, you don't want to buy it. Coming under my Maverick here, this has always been a down south car, and you can see there's really no rust. Some superficial rust, but it's solid as it can be. You can tap on it, that right there, that's just superficial. It's not weak or anything. It's just where it's sat, but it's solid, and you want to do that all the way around. Okay, go around the back here, you see solid all the way around. See this big rust hole in the trunk here? No big deal, but that's just from sitting. The next thing you're going to want to do is look at the engine. Make sure it's not locked up. Now, tip on engines are, if they've been sitting a long time, they will stick and lock up, but usually it's not that hard to get them unstuck and get them going again. What you want to do is you want to take a socket and a ratchet and put it down here on the crankshaft bolt and try to turn it over 2 full rotations. And if you can turn it over 2 full rotations, it's not locked up, and you can easily get it running. But let's say, in my case, when I bought my Maverick and it was locked up, I spent about 2 months working trying to get it unstuck, and nothing I did worked out. I had to completely take the engine all the way down just to the block and slide the cam out. And once I slid the cam out, I let it soak, let the piston soak for 2 months, and motor oil, PB blast, transmission fluid, diesel fuel, nothing helped. So once I got it all the way down, I slid the cam out, pulled the lifters and slid the cam out, put the socket and ratchet on the crank, give it one good tug, and it broke loose. I don't know what it is about camshafts holding motors back when they're, stuck, because they're not really connected. I had the heads off, the lifters, the push rods, the distributor out, and there's nothing connecting the camshaft to the crankshaft, in an engine. Something about a camshaft will hold a motor from turning over. It's been sitting a while. Now, this thing had been sitting for damn near, I got it in 2020, so had been sitting about 6 years when I got it. 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, about 6 years when I got it. And the had no intake manifold, no carburetor. Everything else was intact, but the intake and the carburetor were missing because someone stole them all before I had gotten it. And so when I got it home, worked and worked and worked and worked. I drained the oil, I pulled the heads. Like I said, I tore this motor completely down to the bare block. In order to get it to turn over and get it unstuck, I had to pull the cam. Still don't know what it is about a cam holding an engine back and turning over, but I guess I'll never know. But getting back to the basis of the video, you're buying a classic car, you want to make sure the motor's not stuck. Put a socket on the crank and make sure you can turn it over 2 rotations. Now again, if you do get one and the motor is stuck, usually it's not hard to get them unstuck again. You just want to pull all the spark plugs out and fill each cylinder with some kind of lubricant, whether it be PB Blaster, motor oil, or diesel fuel, or kerosene, or automatic transmission fluid, PB Blaster, whatever. And you just want to let it sit. See, let it sit for a couple of days. And then after that, you can go out there and try to turn it over again. And let's say if the starter's on it, in my case, mine wasn't. It took me, I didn't get starter put on and starter bolts until last year. But if the starter's on the vehicle and it's motor stuck, all you gotta do is pull out all the spark plugs like I mentioned, fill the cylinders with some kind of lubricant, let it sit for a couple of days, put a battery in, make sure your starter's good, put your battery in, and just try to bump it over, bump it over. And usually that torque from the starter will be enough to break it loose if it is stuck. And so, you know, if yours comes unstuck, you know, after letting it sit and using the starter, you know, rotate it a couple of times, keep it rotated, and then get all the oil out of the cylinder that you filled up. Then put your spark plugs back in, check your timing, check your oil. If it's got oil, you need to drain it out, change it. You know, usually if it's been sitting a while, that dirty oil, it won't hurt to run it for a few minutes. But after you get it running good and you get it all worked out, make sure it's running perfectly fine, you want to change the oil and filter. Because dirty oil is more friction, it'll wear it out even faster. It may cause it to lock up again. I've had that happen. But once you get it running, you change the oil, may need to change spark plugs, and make sure everything sounds okay. You know, once they've been sitting, you might hear a little, you know, when you first get it running, you might hear a lot of clattering, but that's just the valves clattering. Once the oil pressure builds up with that clean oil, that noise will go away in some cases. Now, if it wasn't taken care of, the oil wasn't changed, you know, it could be a big mess. And you'd have to, you know, maybe put a new set of heads on it. But when I got my Maverick, it wasn't bad after I got it unstuck. I still haven't got it running because I got some things I got to do, but I'm getting it all worked out. Your transmission. Before you even think about starting that engine up, you want to check the transmission fluid and make sure it's not dirty. Now I'll show you right here the transmission fluid in the Maverick. It's a 50-year-old car, 90,000 miles on it, and just look, if I can get it in the picture for you, maybe see if I can, focus. Anyway, there you go. You can see it's really dirty, it needs to be changed, but I'm going to do that once I get it running, get it on the road, change the fluid and filter gasket, and put it all back together. Another thing you want to look at when you're buying a classic car, if you buy it and it's been sitting a while, all your brakes may be locked up. You may not have any brakes because the master cylinder, the seals have gone bad and it just can't pump anymore. Well, if it's been sitting a while and you got to move it from where it's been sitting, notice the wheels are locked up. Usually it's not hard to get them broke back loose again. Sometimes, in my case, when I bought my Maverick, it broke loose the second time I moved it. Something was holding the rear end back and it was locked up, wouldn't turn. But after I moved it the first time, let it sit for a while, and then moved it the second time, it broke loose. So, but you want to go to each wheel, make sure it can spin freely, and if it can, you won't have no problems loading it up. If it's been sitting a while, you're going to have to put on new brakes all the way around, you know, maybe new lines, hoses, whatever, because they're going to be rotten, they're going to be clogged, they're going to be just a big mess. So you want to keep an eye on that, buying a classic car as well. Another thing you want to look at when you're buying a classic car is the floor pans. You don't want, the floor pans rot out easy if they've been sitting a while, if they've been back in the woods and a lot of water gets in, and they'll rot easily, as I'll show you in my Maverick. But my Maverick was not back in the woods when I bought it, and so, but the floor pans are shot, and they do need to be replaced front and back, and I'll show you that now. We go under my Ford Maverick here. You see the floor pans are shot. It's got a big giant hole in the driver's side. The floor rotted out right here, but that's easy. That's not a big deal. You can find you a good body shop who can replace your floor pans, and it's really not that bad as it seems, because it's replaceable. You can easily weld in new floor pans, and the passenger side's not as bad, but the backs pans are completely gone. See if I can show you. As you can see right there, the floor pans are pretty much gone and sagging in, but that's fixable too, They just weld in new floor pans, simple as that. Not a big deal. And those, ladies and gentlemen, are all the things you need to look for when you're buying a classic car. You want to make sure the frame's in excellent shape. It's not rotting away. As I said, if it lived in, New York or, up north, anywhere up north, because they put a lot of salt on the roads in the wintertime, make sure the frame's not rotting. As you see, mine's in perfectly good shape. It's got some superficial rust, but it's completely solid. You want to make sure your engine turns over freely, and again, if it doesn't, if it's locked up, it's not that hard to get it unstuck. Most of the time, you may have where you get it running and you notice, oh, it's got rod knocker. It's got a bent rod, not a push rod, but a bent push rod. A bent push rod. Those are easy to fix. If it's got rod knock, you're going to need to rebuild the engine. You can always find another engine to put in. Not that big of a deal. I mean, again, it is a classic car. Things are going to need to be worked on, worked out. Unless you buy, one that's been in a garage its whole life, and it may need a little work, but nothing too major, As I said, my Maverick needs floor pans. I got to get the engine finished. Gotta bleed the brakes, put new brakes on, new shocks, all that. But as I said, check the frame, the engine, make sure you can get the engine running. If it's stuck, not that hard to get it unstuck. Make sure your timing's right. Your transmission, you want to make sure your transmission fluid's got fluid in it. And make sure, you're probably going to need to change the fluid filter in the gasket. Not that hard to do, not expensive. You can do it all yourself. And the floors. If it's down south like my Maverick's been its whole life, yeah, the floor pans are pretty bad on mine, but I don't know what did that unless water just got in and just let it go, because it's set for about 10 years before my brother started messing with it, and then but anyway, those are all the things you need to look for when you're buying a classic car. I'll say it again. Make sure your frame's not rotten, and make sure it's solid. Make sure you can get the engine running. Make sure it's not locked up, and if it is, not that hard to unstick it. Transmission fluid, make sure that's full and it's not dirty. If you just change it, make sure your wheels aren't locked up and they spin freely, and make sure your floors are perfectly solid and they're not all rotten out. But rotten out floors can easily be replaced and re-welded in new. Another thing, once you get your classic car running, you want to change all the fluids. Once you get it running, change your oil and filter, change your transmission fluid and filter, change the brake fluid, and flush the brake system out really good if you don't need to replace any of the lines or hoses. and make sure your radiator is full of coolant and you don't run your engine hot after you get it running to ruin it. You don't want to blow it up. But those are all the steps you need to look for and pay attention to when you're buying a classic car. Now, classic cars are fun. I love my Maverick. I'll never get rid of it because it's a family heirloom. It's got a lot of sentimental value. It was my great-grandmother's originally, as I mentioned. Then it was my grandpa bought it from her, and then it became mine. So I'm the third owner. And so I love this car. I want to restore it back to its original glory and make my grandfather and my great-grandmother proud. Make my whole family proud. But that's it for today's video, guys. Now you guys know what to look for when you're buying a classic car. See you in the next one.